Hello again. We're in week one, and today I just want to talk a little bit about creative writing versus academic writing. And in many ways, we're so used to writing formal essays and formal papers, it's tough to break old habits. So I just want to give you an assignment that I would give in, let's say, an English 201 class, and then talk about how we could translate that to a creative writing course. So when I'm teaching English 201, I often assign a paper that says, choose somebody in your life that influenced you, and then talk about how exactly that person influenced you and what the repercussions of that are. So if I were going to write this paper, I would tell a story about my grandfather and then about myself. So here's the story about my grandfather. My grandfather came to New York City from Russia, and in Russia he worked in a mill, but he was also a wrestler, not a WWF guy, but a real college style wrestler, a professional wrestler though. He comes to New York, he's walking down the streets, and he feels somebody put their hand in his pocket. Obviously, pickpocket is going on. So what does my grandfather do? He takes his mighty hand, puts it over the guy's hand, and he walks him to the police station. Busted. Case closed. So now I'm going to fast forward a couple generations. When I first came to New York City, I worked as a bartender downtown in a bar called Chumley's. And while I was there, one of the waiters that nobody on the staff really liked, he decided to buy the restaurant with a couple of partners. And we knew as soon as he bought that restaurant, he was going to fire all of us. Sure enough, the restaurant was sold. He fired everybody. What did we do? We started a union. The union represented us. And the one thing you can't do is fire people because they've started a union. We had started the process before we got fired. I confronted the guy. And he said, I wouldn't have fired you except you started a union. And that's all we needed. Again, case closed. The union represented us, and they settled out of court and gave all of the staff some money to walk away quietly. So there's a story about my grandfather. There's a story about myself. And you can almost see how this paper, in an academic way, would line up. We write our thesis statement through my grandfather's quiet example. I learned to stand up for myself and use the justice system to my advantage. By the way, I've put all of this in the class notes, so I'm just sort of reiterating some things in this video. In creative writing, I'm not going to write a thesis statement. I'm not going to write body paragraphs that sort of use the evidence to make my points. The story itself is key, and my voice is key. So I'm going to drop all of the formalities of academic writing, all the howevers and neverthelesses and due to the fact that's, which are words that ultimately mean nothing anyway. I'm going to try to write in a voice that is natural to me, as if I'm talking to you, the reader, in a much more intimate way. And this is something that we can't necessarily teach. You can't teach it, but it comes really with practice. And the more you write, the more you will see that your voice is becoming your own. So I'm going to tell the story in my voice. I'm probably going to focus on the part of the story I know best, which is my work as a bartender. I can describe the bar. I can describe what it's like. I can describe the confrontation I had with the manager, what it was like to set up the union in very fluid, creative, original prose. From that story, from the telling of the story, from the creating those scenes, the reader will be able to figure out, will be able to infer what the meaning is. But it's a much more powerful way to get across a point than, I believe, uh, an academic essay. So that's something we want to think about. Let down our shoulders a little bit more and find our voices. I also want to say this. We're going to be, a personal narrative is nonfiction. That means it's real. In our next part of our course, we're going to be writing stories which are fiction, which means that reality has been tinkered with. But even though you're writing personal narratives, there is something fictional about that reality. Obviously, we can't give everything in the story. We have to decide how much to give, how much to withhold, what details to sharpen, which details may be extraneous and we don't want to use. So in many ways, by shaping reality, we are kind of fictionalizing that reality. So those things that you're playing with in the personal narrative will be able to be put to use when we start writing fiction. One other thing, don't overload everything in the story. If you think about the simple moment and describe that moment and have some moments where, in a sense, you, the reader, are talking, excuse me, you, the writer, are talking naturally to the reader about what is going on, I have a feeling your personal narratives are going to turn out in a strong and powerful and resonant um, way. So nonfiction, but there's some fictional, made-up sort of elements. We're going to exaggerate maybe a little bit of the truth to make it more vivid. And we're going to start to lose that academic feel that is in our academic papers, but really has no place in creative writing. So think about that as you are working on your personal narratives, which again are coming forward fast and furious in week 3. Everybody knows where they are on the schedule by now. And for this week, do the reading, see how this personal narrative lines up. And if you want to jump ahead, if you look at week 2, you can do the readings there. If you want to think ahead, do the writing prompt on joy, which in many ways will force you to be very personal and to hopefully drop that academic speak in writing a creative piece on when you felt joy. And I think this will all help with your real assignment, your first personal narrative. I think that does it. Read the notes. Everything's stated there in a much more perhaps explicit way, and I will speak to you soon.